Without telling my husband, I took our daughters to the cabin for the holidays. But the moment I stepped inside, my whole world shattered when a little boy looked at him and called him Dad. Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tales, where loyalty dies, lies bleed out, and the truth hits like a slap to the face. These aren't just stories. They're confessions soaked in betrayal and regret. Ever spotted a red flag when it was already too late? Say it in the comments. Hit the subscribe button, and then let's tear into today's tale. I've known Michael for as long as I can remember. We grew up in the same neighborhood in Portland, went to the same school, and even ended up in the same homeroom year after year. Our parents worked together at a local construction firm, and they often brought us along when they visited each other's houses. I can still picture us, sitting side by side in class, passing notes and sharing sandwiches when the cafeteria food was too awful to eat. He used to tease me relentlessly about my short haircut, calling me boyish, while I rolled my eyes and threw his jokes right back at him. What neither of us realized at the time was that behind all the bickering, there was a bond forming, something stronger than childhood friendship. By the time we reached high school, everyone around us had started making predictions. "You two look perfect together," the teachers would say with knowing smiles. My mom would wink at his mother, and they would laugh like they shared a secret. At the time, I brushed it off. Michael was just Michael, the boy who carried my books when they were too heavy and argued with me over who solved the math problem faster. But the night of our senior prom changed everything. We'd been paired together for the graduation dance, and for weeks we had rehearsed the alts in the school gym. At first it was awkward. Neither of us knew what to do with our hands or how close to stand. But slowly it began to feel natural. By the third week, I noticed something in his eyes when they met mine, a spark that hadn't been there before. And one evening, as we walked home past the old oak tree near the corner, he tugged at the hem of my dress nervously and blurted out, "Sophia, I think I love you." My cheeks burned, my heart raced, and I remember stammering back, "I think I love you too." It was clumsy, imperfect, and absolutely unforgettable. After that, everything between us shifted. We were inseparable through that final summer before college. We'd sneak out before dawn to catch the sunrise at Mount Sabre, ride the bus to the coast just to watch the waves, and sometimes stay up all night on the porch talking about our dreams. Our parents didn't stand in our way. If anything, they seemed relieved that what they'd long suspected was finally true. College took us both to Oregon State University. We thought being away from home might challenge us, but instead it only deepened our connection. We juggled classes, part-time jobs, and late-night study sessions together. On weekends, we lived for our spontaneous adventures, hopping on cheap trains, hitching rides with friends, and backpacking to places we'd only seen in magazines. One summer, we even made it all the way to New York City, broke and exhausted, but happier than we'd ever been. It felt like the world was ours, and for a while, nothing seemed impossible. It was during our second year that Michael proposed. He didn't make a grand gesture or stage a scene. We were sitting on the hood of his old Ford after a late-night drive, eating fries from a paper bag when he suddenly turned to me with a ring he bought with money from his internship. His voice trembled when he asked, "Will you marry me someday after we graduate?" I laughed, half in shock, half in joy, and said yes before he could even finish a sentence. The only condition we made was to finish our degrees first. We both graduated, me with honors, him with a distinction that made his parents beam with pride. A year later, we stood in front of our closest family and a handful of friends in a small ceremony at a Portland courthouse. There were no chandeliers, no extravagant gowns, just us, our vows, and a few white doves released by our parents afterward. We didn't care about fancy receptions or expensive photographs. What mattered was that we were finally husband and wife. I still remember looking at the framed photo from that day. The two of us standing together, young and beaming, him in a simple shirt and me in a light summer dress. It hung on our living room wall for years. That photo captured a moment when everything felt pure and simple, when the promise of our future seemed unshakable. I thought we had it all. I thought our story was just beginning, and it would be the kind of story that lasted forever. When I turned 30, I thought my life was finally coming together the way I had imagined. I was building a career I loved at a local design firm in Portland, dreaming of promotions, new projects, maybe even traveling abroad for work. Motherhood wasn't on my immediate agenda. Michael and I had talked about kids someday, but someday always felt far away. Then in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, a routine doctor's appointment turned into a life-changing moment. The ultrasound technician smiled, tilted the screen toward me, and said gently, "Congratulations, you're carrying twins." I remember laughing nervously, certain I had misheard. "Twins? Are you serious?" The doctor nodded, and Michael, sitting beside me, squeezed my hand so tightly I thought he might never let go. My mind swirled with 1,000 questions. 2 babies at once. How would we afford it? What about my career? But when I looked at Michael's face, wide-eyed, stunned and glowing with pride, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time, I imagined myself as a mother, and the idea didn't terrify me. It felt like a new adventure. The months that followed were surprisingly smooth. My pregnancy was considered high risk because of the twins, but aside from constant fatigue and a backache that made sleep nearly impossible, everything went better than I expected. Our families rallied around us. My parents dropped off homemade soups and casseroles, while Michael's mom brought me herbal teas and knitted tiny hats. Even our neighbors seemed to be watching out for us, offering to help shovel snow or carry groceries when winter made everything harder. Michael threw himself into work, taking on extra shifts and side projects. He insisted we needed a larger savings cushion, and I didn't argue. Every time he came home late, exhausted, but determined, I reminded myself it was for the family we were building. Meanwhile, I shifted my focus entirely. I left the design firm earlier than I had planned and devoted myself to preparing for our new arrivals. I read parenting books, decorated the nursery, and found myself talking to my belly at night, whispering promises to the 2 little lives growing inside me. When Emma and Olivia finally arrived, the delivery was long and grueling, but the moment I held them, everything else faded. They were tiny, wrinkled, and perfect. 2 identical faces blinking up at me as if they had known me all along. Michael stood by my side, tears in his eyes whispering, "They're beautiful. Sophia, you did it." In that instant, the exhaustion, the uncertainty, even the fear melted away. I was their mother, and I felt whole. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life. Nights blurred into days as I rocked one baby to sleep while the other cried for milk. There were times I felt like a machine, feeding, burping, changing, and starting all over again. The laundry piled up, bottles cluttered every surface, and I barely recognized myself in the mirror. And yet I was happy. The chaos felt like proof of something sacred. Every sleepy smile, every tiny hand clutching my finger made the exhaustion worth it. Michael kept his promise to provide for us. He worked longer hours, sometimes falling asleep on the couch, still in his clockwork. I tried not to resent his absence. He wasn't neglecting us. He was building a foundation, making sure our girls had everything they needed. And I told myself that as long as we were in this together, nothing could shake us. I traded career ambitions for lullabies and midnight feedings. And though the world outside our home moved on without me, I felt a strange peace. For the first time, I wasn't chasing deadlines or promotions. I was holding on to something far more fragile, far more precious. I was a mother now. And even in my most exhausted moments, I believed it was exactly where I was meant to be. The first 2 years with Emma and Olivia passed in a kind of blissful blur. Our little house in Portland became a cocoon of warmth and routine. Every morning, I'd wake up to the soft sound of the girls babbling in their cribs, their identical faces lighting up as soon as they saw me. I learned the rhythm of our days. Bottles lined up on the counter, laundry cycles humming in the background. Lullabies sung on repeat until I almost believed they were part of me. I slipped so naturally into the role of a full-time mother that I sometimes forgot there had been a time when I couldn't imagine myself in it. Michael was my anchor during those years. He worked hard, but when he came home, he always made time for us. He would scoop the girls into his arms, shower them with kisses, and then look at me as if I were the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Even when my hair was messy and my clothes stained with formula. On weekends, he insisted we take family walks through Forest Park or drive up to the Columbia River Gorge. The four of us bundled together, the girls wide-eyed in their strollers. Those simple moments felt like perfection. Our parents were thrilled, too. My mom visited often, teaching me tricks she had learned raising me and my siblings. Michael's parents were just as devoted, showing up with groceries or staying late to babysit so we could steal a rare evening out. We weren't wealthy, but we didn't need to be. Love filled the cracks where money sometimes fell short. Our marriage felt strong, maybe stronger than ever. Every night when we finally collapsed into bed, Michael would wrap his arm around me and whisper, "We're doing okay, Sophia. Better than okay." And I believed him. But as the months stretched into years, a subtle unease began to creep in. At first it was nothing more than a flicker of thought I could easily push aside. I'd glance in the mirror and see the same sweatpants, the same tired eyes, and wonder briefly about the woman I used to be. The one who chased deadlines, gave presentations, and dreamed of designing buildings that touched the sky. She felt like a stranger now. The longer I stayed home, the more distant that version of me became. Friends from college posted updates about their careers, their travels, their achievements. I congratulated them with a smile, but afterward I'd sit quietly nursing a sense of being left behind. Michael reassured me whenever I voiced these fears. He would say, "You're raising our daughters, Sophia. That's the most important job in the world." And in my heart, I knew he was right, but part of me longed for more, for proof that I was still capable of standing on my own outside the safety of our home. Still, I buried those feelings. I told myself that fulfillment looked different for everyone, and that mine was here, rocking my babies to sleep, keeping our family together. For a while, that belief was enough. The comfort of domestic life wrapped around me like a blanket, warm and familiar. Yet deep inside, I couldn't shake the quiet fear that one day the world would move on without me and I would be standing still. When Emmy and Olivia were nearing 3, Michael and I began to talk about preschool. He believed it was time for them to start socializing, learning independence, and giving me a chance to return to work if I wanted. But the idea unsettled me. The thought of strangers, watching over my daughters, teaching them, feeding them, it made my chest tighten. I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. One evening, as we sat at the kitchen table, the conversation turned tense. "Sophia," Michael said, rubbing his temples, "they need to be around other kids. You can't shelter them forever." "I'm not sheltering them." I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. "They're still so young. Why rush it? I can handle them here at home." His sigh filled the room. "It's not just about them. It's about us, too. You deserve time for yourself. And honestly, I need some room to breathe." The word stung. Room to breathe. I had given up my career, my ambitions to raise our children. And now he wanted freedom from the very life we had chosen together. That was the first moment I realized something between us was shifting. Not long after, Michael's schedule began to change. He came home later and later, often after the girls were already asleep. When I asked, he explained he had taken on a side job, something he couldn't discuss in detail. "It's nothing illegal," he assured me quickly when he saw my worried face, "just something I need to do for extra income. Trust me, Sophia, it'll help us in the long run." But his vagueness gnawed at me. He used to tell me everything, even the smallest details of his day. Now there were silences where once there had been stories. I noticed the way he kept his phone face down on the table, the way he stepped outside to take calls in the cold, his voice low and hurried. The unease grew worse when one of our neighbors pulled me aside casually. "I saw Michael the other night," she said almost apologetically. It was late around midnight. "He was out by the corner store, talking on his phone. He looked nervous." I brushed it off with a smile, but inside my stomach churned. At home, I confronted him gently. He just shook his head, kissed my forehead, and said, "Please, Sophia, not now. Just give me a little time." My mother's words didn't help. Over coffee one afternoon, she leaned closer and whispered, "Honey, are you sure he doesn't have someone else? Men get restless. They look for excitement. You should be careful." I wanted to believe she was wrong. Michael wasn't the type to cheat, or at least he hadn't been. But once the seed of doubt is planted, it grows quietly, taking root in the corners of your mind. Every late night, every hushed call, every vague answer seemed to water that seed. Finally, one night after another strange conversation, he looked me in the eye and said, "Sophia, I just need you to trust me. 1 year. That's all I ask. Just give me 1 year and everything will make sense." A year felt like an eternity, but when I saw the desperation in his eyes, I nodded. I told myself I could wait. I told myself trust was the foundation of marriage. And yet, deep down, a quiet voice whispered that our foundation was already beginning to crack. By the time December rolled around, I had convinced myself that Michael's secret side job was just that, work. I still didn't know what it was, but I clung to the hope that he was telling the truth when he said it was all for us. And with the new year approaching, I wanted to remind us both of what we once had, of the joy and lightness that seems so far away now. So in secret, I began to plan. I dipped into the savings I'd carefully set aside and booked us a trip to Egypt, a week just for the two of us, with my parents and his mother ready to watch the girls. It was something I'd always dreamed of, standing under the shadow of the pyramids, tracing history with my own hands. And I thought maybe, just maybe, it could be the fresh start we needed. I pictured his face when I told him. The surprise, the gratitude, the way his eyes would soften like they used to. I imagined us walking hand in hand through Cairo's crowded streets, laughing, rediscovering the love that had carried us from childhood to here. 4 weeks, I held on to that dream, wrapping it like a gift I couldn't wait to give. On New Year's Eve, our house was alive with warmth. My parents came over, his mom too, the girls giggling as they tried to stay awake long enough to see the fireworks. We had champagne chilling in the fridge, the smell of roasted turkey filling the kitchen, and music playing softly in the background. It felt like a night meant for celebration. When the clock struck midnight, everyone blinked her glasses, laughter echoing against the windows as fireworks burst outside. I waited for the right moment, my heart pounding. Then with a smile, I stood up and handed Michael a small envelope. "Happy New Year," I said softly. "This is for us." He tore it open, his brow furrowing as he pulled out the airline tickets. For a moment, there was silence. Then his expression hardened, his eyes darkening in a way that made my stomach drop. "Sophia, what is this?" His voice was flat, almost cold. "A trip," I said quickly, my excitement faltering. "Just for us two. Egypt. My parents already agreed to watch the girls. We deserve this. Michael, don't you see?" He shook his head, his jaw tight. "You don't understand. I can't just leave. Not now. Not with everything I've got going on. It's 1 week," I pleaded. 1 week for our marriage, for us." But he pushed the tickets back toward me, his voice rising. "No, I told you, Sophia, I can't abandon my work. Why can't you respect that?" The room went quiet. My parents exchanged uneasy glances. His mother shifted uncomfortably. Even the girls seemed to sense the change, clinging to my legs. Something inside me cracked. All the doubts, all the late nights, all the unanswered questions came rushing forward. My voice shook as I whispered, "It's not about work, is it? You're hiding something from me." Michael's face flushed with anger, but he didn't deny it. He just muttered, "I can't do this right now," and stormed out of the room. The front door slammed so hard the walls rattled. I stood frozen, the tickets trembling in my hand. The fireworks outside continued, exploding in brilliant colors against the night sky. But all I felt was darkness. In that moment, surrounded by family, yet completely alone, I knew something vital between us had broken. My trust in him had splintered, and no celebration could mask the hollow ache left behind. In the days that followed New Year's Eve, the silence between Michael and me became unbearable. I couldn't look at the tickets without feeling a sharp twist of pain, so I tucked them into the back of a drawer and tried not to think about them. But the hurt lingered, his refusal, his anger, the way he walked out on me in front of our families. It was more than I could absorb. So one morning, after another night of him coming home late and me lying awake, waiting for answers that never came, I packed a few bags. I bundled Emma and Olivia into the car and drove to my parents' house. My mom opened the door, her face lined with worry the moment she saw me standing there with tears in my eyes. "Iko, what happened?" she whispered, pulling the girls inside. "I can't stay there right now," I managed. I need space." My parents didn't press me for details. They set up the guest room, filled the kitchen with the smell of my mother's cooking, and let me breathe. For a few days, I felt safe. Again, away from the tension that had infected our home. I thought maybe Michael would reach out, explain himself, finally tell me what was so important that he couldn't take a single week away. He did show up eventually. It was late on a Saturday evening when he knocked on my parents' door, looking worn and desperate. He asked to talk, and we sat together on the porch while the girls played inside. His voice was low, almost pleading. "Sophia, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have snapped at you. I shouldn't have walked out." I searched his face, waiting for more, for the truth, for something that would make sense of all the secrecy. But he gave me nothing. Just apologies without explanations. Empty promises that things would get better. "I just need you to trust me," he said again. The same words he had repeated before. "Please come home." And against the judgment screaming in my chest, I agreed. For the girls, I told myself, for the life we had built, but going back didn't erase what had happened. Our home no longer felt warm. We shared meals in silence, the clatter of forks and spoons louder than our conversations. He would glance at me across the table, but his eyes seemed far away, focused on something I couldn't see. At night, when we lay in the same bed, there was a space between us that neither of us crossed. It was during that time I realized I needed something for myself again. I couldn't keep waiting for Michael to fill the emptiness. I reached out to my old firm, and to my surprise, they welcomed me back part-time. Walking into that office again with its smell of coffee and ink, its hum of creativity, was like stepping into a forgotten part of myself. I began to feel independent again, a version of Sophia that had been buried under diapers and late-night feedings. It gave me strength, a reminder that I wasn't just a wife and mother, but also a woman with her own identity. Yet every evening when I returned home to Michael, the weight of our fractured marriage pressed down again. My career gave me purpose, but it couldn't thaw the cold silence between us. The man I had once known so well now felt like a stranger across the table. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the fear that the distance between us was only growing wider. It was early spring when I reconnected with Laura, my closest friend from college. We had drifted apart after graduation, life, careers, and families pulling us in different directions. But seeing her again felt like no time had passed at all. She called one afternoon, her voice bubbling with excitement, and invited me to dinner. "Bring Michael," she said warmly. "I want our husbands to meet. I think you'll love Chris." That evening, we drove across town to their house. The moment I stepped inside, I felt like I'd walked into a magazine spread. Their home was immaculate. Sleek furniture, fresh flowers and tall vases. Artwork that probably cost more than our car. Laura looked radiant, her confidence filling the room just as much as her laughter. And then there was Chris. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a kind of presence that made people listen when he spoke. He shook my hand firmly, and then turned to Michael, greeting him with easy charm. Within minutes, Chris was telling stories about his business ventures, the trips he'd taken, the deals he'd closed. He carried himself like a man who was used to winning. I stole a glance at Michael. His smile was tight, his shoulders stiff. He nodded politely at Chris's stories, but I could feel the tension radiating off him. Later, when we sat down to dinner, the contrast between the two men became impossible to ignore. Chris spoke animatedly about investments, politics, and travel plans. Michael stayed quiet, pushing his food around his plate, offering little more than clipped answers when asked about his work. Laura, oblivious to the undercurrent, filled the silence with chatter. She asked about Emma and Olivia, and I felt my heart swell as I described their latest milestones. For a while, it felt like old times, me and Laura laughing, remembering silly college days, but whenever I looked across the table, I saw Michael's jaw tighten a little more, his eyes darting away from Chris as if refusing to acknowledge him. On the drive home, the silence between us was heavy. Finally, Michael muttered, "I don't like him." "Chris," I asked, surprised. "Why?" "He was perfectly nice." "He's arrogant," Michael said sharply. "Full of himself. I don't see why you need to spend time with people like that." I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur by. What I didn't say was that I had noticed the same things he had. Chris was confident, self-assured, maybe even arrogant, but he was also successful, charismatic, the kind of man people respected. And sitting across from him, I couldn't help but notice how small Michael seemed in comparison. The thought shamed me. I love my husband, but the difference between him and Chris gnawed at me in a way I couldn't ignore. Still, my friendship with Laura was something I wasn't willing to give up. Whatever Michael felt, I needed her in my life. She was a reminder of who I had been before motherhood and marriage consumed me. So, I promised myself I wouldn't let his discomfort ruin it. I would see Laura again. And though I didn't realize it, then that choice would pull me deeper into a web of truths I wasn't prepared to face. That winter, Laura invited us to spend the holidays together. But Michael claimed he couldn't get away. He told me again about his side job, insisting it demanded too much of his time. I was disappointed, but tried to hide it. Instead, I decided to take the girls up to the old family cabin near Mount Hood, the one my parents had passed down to me. I thought the fresh mountain air and the quiet of the pines would be good for us. The drive took a couple of hours, winding through snowy roads. Emma and Olivia sang Christmas songs in the back seat, their laughter filling the car. By the time we pulled up to the cabin, dusk was settling over the mountain, painting the snow in shades of violet and gray. I expected the place to be dark and cold, waiting for me to unlock it. But as I approached, I noticed smoke curling from the chimney. My heart skipped. I hesitated at the door, my keys clutched in my hand. When I pushed it open, the warmth of the fire washed over me. And there, standing in the middle of the living room, was Michael. I froze. That was my cabin, my family's cabin. He knew I came here every winter, especially during the holidays. Why would he bring a child here of all places? Had he really thought I wouldn't come? For a moment I couldn't breathe. "Michael!" My voice trembled. "What are you doing here?" He froze, his eyes widening as if I had caught him in the act of something unspeakable. Before he could answer, a small voice piped up from the corner. "Daddy!" I turned toward the sound and my world tilted. A little boy, no more than 4 years old, came running into the room, his arms outstretched. He clung to Michael's leg with the ease of someone who had done it 100 times before. My vision blurred, the blood roaring in my ears. Who is that?" I whispered. Michael's face drained of color. He tried to speak, but no words came. The boy looked up at him with adoration, repeating, "Daddy, Daddy," as if the word were the only truth he knew. I staggered back, nearly dropping the bags from my hands. Emma and Olivia stood behind me, wide-eyed, clutching each other's hands. I forced myself to stay upright, though every part of me wanted to collapse. "Michael," I demanded, my voice sharper now, trembling with fury. "Tell me who this child is." He opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally stammered. "Sophia, please. I can explain. I didn't think you'd come this year. You always spent Christmas with your parents, and I thought it would be empty. Explain." I choked out, There's a child calling you his father in our cabin, and you expect me to stand here and wait for explanations. The boy, sensing the tension, hid behind Michael's leg. My daughters stared at me, confused, their innocence cutting me like a knife. I stepped closer, my hands shaking, my chest heaving. You've been lying to me, haven't you? All those late nights, all those phone calls, the secrets. Was it because of him? Michael's shoulders slumped, his eyes pleading. Just give me a chance to tell you everything. Please, Sophia, don't do this in front of the kids. But it was too late. The damage was already done. In that cabin, surrounded by the scent of burning wood and the silence of the mountains, I realized the trust one had clung to for years had shattered. Whatever explanation Michael had, nothing could undo the sight of that little boy calling him Dad. I stood frozen in the middle of the cabin, my eyes locked on the boy who clung so naturally to Michael. Every part of me screamed betrayal. I demanded again, who is he, Michael? Tell me the truth. Michael ran a hand over his face, his expression heavy with exhaustion. Finally, he said, Sophia, he's not mine. He's Chris's, Laura's husband. Chris had an affair, and when the boy's mother refused to keep him, Chris begged me to step in. He couldn't raise him, not without destroying his marriage. So I've been helping. For a moment, I just stared, stunned by the audacity of the story. Then, I shook my head, my chest tight with anger. Do you really expect me to believe that this boy isn't yours? That all these nights away, the secrecy, the lies, it was all to cover for someone else? Michael reached for me, his voice desperate. I swear, Sophia, I couldn't tell you. Not without exposing everything. Chris begged me to keep it quiet. He said Laura could never know. I was trying to protect them. He told me it would only be for a few months, just until he figured things out. I never meant for it to go on this long. But the weeks turned into months, and then into years. And every time I tried to step away, he begged me again, saying he had no other choice. I was caught in a lie I didn't know how to end. I stepped back, my throat burning. Protect them? What about me? What about our daughters? You let me question my sanity, my worth, my marriage, all for this. The boy peeked at me from behind Michael's leg, and I felt my knees weaken. Something about his eyes, the curve of his face, made the truth even harder to grasp. I couldn't stop the thought. What if he was Michael's? What if everything I had built my life on was a lie? I couldn't bear the uncertainty. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, scrolled to Chris's number, and pressed call. Michael tried to stop me, whispering, Sophia, please don't. But I shoved his hand away. Chris answered on the second ring, his voice casual at first. But when I told him where I was, what I had seen, the silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Finally, he exhaled a broken sound. Sophia, please don't tell Laura. My blood ran cold. So it's true. He hesitated, then confessed in a voice so low I could barely hear it. Yes, I made a mistake. It happened once years ago. I thought it was over, but then the child. I couldn't bring him home. Not to Laura. She'd never forgive me. Michael, he offered to help. He said he'd keep the boy safe. I closed my eyes, the phone trembling against my ear. His words should have brought clarity, but instead they deepened the wound. Not only was my marriage fractured by lies, but my best friend's life was built on the same fragile illusion. Chris, I whispered, my voice raw. Do you understand what you've done to her? To me. Please, he begged. I'm asking you, don't tell her. She can't know. It would destroy her. I ended the call without answering, my whole body numb. I looked at Michael, at the boy, at my daughters who were watching from the doorway. My world had tilted in an instant. It wasn't just my marriage on the line. My best friend's entire life had been betrayed, too. I didn't sleep that night. The cabin wall seemed to close, and around me, every creak of the wood amplified by the storm. Inside my chest, Michael lay beside me, silent, the little boy asleep in the next room. I stared at the ceiling, knowing there was only one thing left to do. Laura deserved to know. No matter How much it would hurt her, she had the right to face the truth. The next morning, I called her. My voice was calm, too calm, as I asked her to come up to the cabin. She didn't hesitate, just said she'd be there by the afternoon. When I ended the call, my hands were trembling, but my decision was steady. When Laura arrived, she looked radiant as always, her smile easy, her hug warm. "Sophia, it's been too long," she said. But the warmth in her eyes made what I was about to do almost unbearable. I led her inside, my heart pounding, and gestured toward the small boy who was quietly playing with wooden blocks near the fireplace. She glanced at him, then at me. "Whose child is this?" she asked lightly. I took a deep breath. "Laura, he's Chris's son." For a moment, her face didn't change. The words seemed to hang in the air, too heavy to sink in. Then, slowly, the color drained from her cheeks. "What are you talking about?" Michael stepped forward, trying to intervene, but I held up my hand. "I called Chris. He admitted it. This boy, he's the result of an affair. And Michael, he's been helping to hide it." Laura's knees buckled and she collapsed onto the couch, her hands clutching her face. Her sobs tore through the room, raw and shattering. No, it can't be true," she cried. "He wouldn't do this to me." I wanted to reach out to comfort her, but I knew my touch would mean nothing. Her world had just been ripped apart, just like mine had been. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes were red, swollen, blazing with betrayal. "All these years," she whispered, her voice trembling. "And he let me believe we had a perfect life. He let me love him while he carried this secret." She shook her head violently. "It's over. My marriage is over." She left soon after, her sobs echoing down the mountain road as she drove away. Watching her go, I felt both relief and guilt. Relief that the truth was no longer mine to hold. Guilt that I had been the one to break her heart, even if the real betrayal had come from Chris. That night, Michael tried to reach me. He touched my shoulder gently, his voice low. "Sophia, I never meant to hurt you. I was trying to protect everyone. I thought I was doing the right thing." I pulled away, staring into the fire. The right thing would have been to tell me the truth, to trust me with it. Instead, you left me drowning. In doubt. He didn't argue. He just sat there silent, his head bowed. I lay awake long after the fire had burned to embers, weighing my choices. Divorce hovered at the edge of my mind, a word that felt both terrifying and inevitable. But then I thought of Emma and Olivia, their laughter, their small hands reaching for mine. I couldn't make a decision yet, not with their futures tied so tightly to ours. What I knew for certain was this: trust once shattered is nearly impossible to repair. And sometimes the truth, no matter how cruel, no matter how destructive, is the only path to freedom. Speaking it had destroyed one marriage and cracked another, but it had also released us from the shadows of deception. As I watched the first light of dawn spill over Mount Hood, I whispered to myself, better a painful truth than a beautiful lie. And though my future felt uncertain, I knew I had chosen clarity over illusion. It was the only way forward.